Coming up on this episode of Nintendo Cartridge Society, we attend a Nintendo pep rally as we discuss the ABCs of Nintendo sports. It's dangerous to go alone, so the Nintendo Cartridge Society goes with you. Welcome to Nintendo Cartridge Society. My name is Patrick Ellers, and I am joined, as I am always joined, by my co-host, Mark Mitchell. Mark, how you doing?
I'm doing great. It's just a great day to be alive.
It is a great day to be alive. Yes, I'm very, very happy to be alive. Happy to not be the opposite of alive. Is that too dark? That's too dark. I shouldn't. This is a weird place to go at the top of the show.
Yeah, we usually save that for the send-off, don't we?
Yeah, that's right. Usually at the end, we're like, be thankful for you, the fact that you now live, even though we are all mortal. Mark, I had a thought today that I want to. I've been playing Final Fantasy VI, Final Fantasy 3 on the Super NES Classic Edition. I just played the opera sequence, loved it. That game's incredible. It makes me think that I need to give all the Final Fantasy games another honest try. So
great. I think that's an amazing project. Where to begin?
Well, I mean, where indeed? Begin by finishing Final Fantasy VI and then being totally turned off by the whole concept. Because by the time you get to the end of any Final Fantasy game, you're like, oh yeah, I remember why I didn't want to play this. It's too much grinding.
Well, remind me what the last Final Fantasy that you played is. Is it? Have you played 12?
No, I've not played 12.
Have you?
I think 10 was the last one I was like serious about. Although I played most of 7 Remake.
Oh right. Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I guess that counts.
I think that 10 is definitely worth your time, and I think 12 is also definitely worth your time. Anything past that, like I didn't like 13, and I haven't played anything past that to like have an opinion. But I think 10 and 12 are definitely worth reevaluating.
Here's the thing. 15, the like Royal Edition or whatever they call like the deluxe that has like everything in it, is on sale on the PlayStation Store right now for like $15. So I might be going for Final Fantasy 15. I might be going for the boy band road trip. That may be where I'm headed next.
So I mean, I haven't played 15, so I don't know. But what I'm worried is that you will go into 15 and you will be turned off by it, and then you will never play 12, which I think you should give an honest shot.
Well, okay, but so you think 12 is one that is going to hook me in, that like is good, then that's available on Switch, right?
Yeah. I think 12 is great. I had a ton of fun with 12.
Well, so that's why I say I go 15 next, and then I loop back when I'm like, now I need like a good one, and then we can play 12. And if it's not good, I hold you responsible.
Do you know? I mean, that logic is like sound. It's hard to poke any holes in that.
Speaking of things you can't poke holes in, my copy of Sonic Forces. Would you like to borrow it? Please don't poke. You can do there. Look, there are no rules when it comes to this program, but please don't poke holes in my copy of Sonic Forces. You can borrow it. All you gotta do is email us at Nintendo Cartridge Society at gmail.com. And then I send you my copy of Sonic Forces for the Nintendo Switch. However, it is possible that when you go to open my copy of Sonic Forces for the Nintendo Switch, you see a big fat goose in there. You've been saddled with the Untitled Goose Game. It's a prank from the goose. You have no choice in this. You just have to deal with it. And if you want the goose, also kind of tough. You have no control over that.
I'm imagining the sequence of events like somebody opens the Sonic Forces borrowing program, the Sonic Forces case. And
yeah, the case just says Sonic Forces on it. It does not identify itself as part of the Sonic Forces borrowing program.
So somebody opens the Sonic Forces game case, and you know, like the novelty can of nuts that when you open it, like
it's just like
snake springs out, like like the Untitled Goose Game just like springs out unexpectedly.
No, it is a full goose head, and I go hong, and it's there. You got to deal with it.
Well, just beware, I guess.
Just anyway, get involved in that. Here's another thing you can get involved in. We look. every week on the show, we do a topic called 433, where Mark and I talk about something not at all Nintendo related for 4 minutes and 33 seconds. For our 433rd episode, which is coming up, we are going to do a whole episode of 433s, but we don't want them to be, comfortable topics that we know that we pick. We want you to give us topics. Thank you to those of you who have pitched some softball topics. I do love those. Also, thank you to those of you who have pitched some very difficult topics. I'm not necessarily looking forward to it, but I think it'll be fun. Thank you so much to Dominic, to Tiago, to Peter, and to Adam, who have already sent in suggestions. But if you have suggestions of topics you would like us to discuss for a little over 4.5 minutes, you can email them to Nintendo Cartridge Society at gmail.com. And we need those by the end of the day on February 9th, so we can talk about them just that later the next day, I guess, and then you'll hear it the day after that. I'm not looking at a calendar. I'm just guessing here. But that all makes sense to me. All right, Mark, let's get into our topic. We are doing the ABCs of Nintendo Sports. A to Z, we like to break these episodes up into 2 parts because, it takes a long time to get through 26 letters, especially when we each have something for each letter. So this is going to be A through M. Mark, before we dig in here, I was wondering if you had any insight as to how you approach this, or what you consider to be Nintendo Sports.
Yeah. So I found this not difficult, but challenging. Maybe I did find it difficult.
Sure, synonyms. Yeah, okay, yes.
But some of these were a little bit tough. So I would say that my entry point to these letters it's sometimes a long road to the final destination. But it was fun because it was a little bit out of the usual stuff that I would say my usual Nintendo backpack, where I'm and I can talk about this, and I can talk about this, and I can talk about this. So it was kind of a fun exercise, stretching that rubber band a little bit.
Yeah, I will agree and say that it is a lot of the same experience for me. What I found most interesting was that I don't consider myself. I'm not a big sports fan in general. I like baseball mostly because Sarah watches it, and that kind of feeds into my video game diet as well. That I don't play a lot of sports video games. But I was surprised by how many games I do have a close personal relationship with, and have spent a lot of time with. So this was something that sort of revealed to me that I have some biases towards Nintendo sports games. I like them. I don't know what to tell myself. It doesn't feel right, but here we are, and I've got a bunch of examples of games that I really liked. Okay. And sometimes Mark, same as you, sometimes I take a real long walk to get back to what we're talking about. I don't think we're going to see any of that this week, but boy howdy, look out for next week. We're going to take some long walks.
I mean, when you're getting into the X, Y's, and Z's, what are you going to do?
You're going to do the best you can. But Mark, we're not doing those yet. We're not doing those today. We are doing A through M. Would you like to start with your A, and then I'll go and we'll snake back and forth like that?
Yeah, that sounds great. So my A is Aero Sports, AERO Sports, specifically talking about the Pilotwings series.
Yes,
a series that we haven't had an entry for a while. I think the last one was Pilotwings Resort on the Nintendo 3DS. But before that, you had Pilotwings 64 and then Pilotwings, both of which were launch titles for the N64 and the SNES, respectively.
Pilotwings 64 notably was one of 2 launch games. Just Pilotwings and Mario 64. They were the only games to release with the Nintendo 64. No third-party games released with that system.
Yeah, it's interesting. I feel like both of those titles, I didn't buy an N64 or a SNES. I didn't have them at launch. It wasn't until much later. So Pilotwings 64 was not a game that I played a ton of. But it's interesting how both of them were kind of used as a way to introduce the new technical aspects of the system, like Mode 7 on the SNES, and then moving through 3D space in a different way than you would in Mario 64. on the Nintendo 64. And the series is like to my mind most memorable for like the incongruity between the like kind of like sometimes infuriatingly challenging, or like the challenges in the game require such precision, but
Yeah.
then one of the most like lasting and memorable aspects of the series is like its chill like jazz soundtrack, and
Oh, the
like
music's so good in these games.
the intersection between those two things like makes the game tolerable, because you're like trying to do these like you're in your little jetpack, or you're in like this like uh aero auto gyro, and you're trying to make these like really precise landings or hit these really precise targets. And when the smooth like artificial saxophone sounds of cyber jazz are playing in the background, it somehow is just like tones the nerves just enough.
Is this a franchise that, because I feel like my relationship to Pilot Wings is always, for all of them, try it for a little bit, not understand what I'm doing wrong, and then give up. Is that your experience too, or like, because they've been, especially the original Pilot Wings has been represented on a lot of different platforms. It's on the SNES Online, it's on the SNES Classic, and it's been available on nearly every virtual console that Nintendo has put out. So like, have you like had a chance to like really dig in and like really play them, really get good at them?
No, so like the N64 game, like I've only played a little bit, like very casually, and mostly just have memories of like watching my friends and cousins, like put a lot of time into it.
Yeah.
For the SNES one, like it, I don't think it's aged very well. Partly because it is like, it's the controls are really finicky. It requires a lot of precision, and is a graphical showcase for the SNES, but like not in a way that is aged particularly well. Kind of like the first like F-Zero game, where you're like, oh, this is really cool, and I could see how this was awesome when the SNES launched. But now, like, there's not a lot of meat on the bone, and that's how I feel about the original Pilot Wings.
That makes sense. I also struggle with the use of Mode 7 in the original Pilot Wings. Um, I'll disagree on the F-Zero though. I feel like F-Zero weirdly holds up. Like, but its use of Mode 7, it feels very fast in a way that is frequently uncontrollable for me, and that I can't like wrap my head around. But it, like, graphically, I absolutely adore it.
Well, maybe we shouldn't talk about too much about F-Zero in case
We
it
will not, in case it comes back up. Very good. My A is, look, I went straight down the barrel here. I went with a recent game. I'm talking Aces here, Mario Tennis Aces. A really solid tennis game featuring the Mario characters, that has sort of a brutal learning curve to it. And especially as you're playing through the single player mode, which is, it's like a story, but not really. There's no like meat on the story, and there's no like role playing elements to it, which I know was something that like people had sort of hoped for. But it is really just an excuse to present you with a bunch of very precise. Again, this is speaking sort of the same language as your Aerosports thing, of like very precise challenges, and like getting to understand how, like, particularly you can control the path of that tennis ball, and how you store up meter and eventually use the meter, and when to use it to save, when to use it to attack. I really liked the week or so that I spent playing Mario Tennis Aces and like muscling my way through that story mode.
Yeah, and you really did muscle your way through it, because you finished it before the update to the game landed, where they like like sanded
Oh
off the
yeah.
edges a little bit. Like, it was easier to like retry challenges without having to go through the whole rigmarole. Like,
Yeah.
I,
You used to have to like do the dialogue at the end of it being like you lost, and then start it again and get all the dialogue at the beginning of it, 4 or 5 lines, and then it loads up the match again. Now you can just go play again.
yeah, and like I never went back once they added that, and I gave up, like, I mean, generously maybe halfway through it. It just became like too technical and too difficult for me to do.
Man, when it is at its most technical and you're able to like keep up with it, it's like a fighting game. It's wonderful. Mario Tennis Aces is a very good game wrapped in like a frustrating shell, you know? Like I wish it was better at onboarding you. I wish it was better at communicating its systems to you. And just like all Nintendo games in the Switch era, I wish its online was better.
I was never able to even compete in any of the tournaments. I was on. It was before I bought a Ethernet adapter because I
Yeah.
bought that for Smash Brothers Ultimate, and so I was trying to do it on Wi-Fi, and my like like the Switch's Wi-Fi is generally not that great, but my
Yeah.
Switch used to sit in like the corner of my apartment away from the router, and it was just like there was no way that I was going to be able to connect.
Yeah, I've disconnected from more matches of that than anything else. Like I don't know why I don't have that problem in like Splatoon, and I know I don't why I don't have that problem in Smash. It's because I never take it online. But yeah, I mean, Aces. I'm not going to say that it is a underappreciated game because I feel like it got its moment for sure. Um, and it's one I frequently think about going back to just because it is a rock solid experience. I may do some of that tonight. That sounds like fun.
Yeah, and they supported it for a long time after release. I think for it was on that yearly cadence that Nintendo was doing
Yeah,
with a
that's
number of
right.
games like Star Allies. And you were getting new players,
New
new
characters,
characters
and
all the
brackets and
time
stuff. Yeah.
by like participating, even if you didn't do great, like participating in the online tournaments. But I think it probably has been years at this point that they had an online tournament. Now that I have an Ethernet connector, now would be a great time for them to bring that back.
This is now a Mario Tennis podcast. We are converting all the way over. Okay, we are moving on to B now. I go first. Mark, this is my first hardware entry. I'm going to talk about the balance board for the Nintendo Wii, which I decided I made this determination early on that Nintendo Sports also includes Nintendo Fitness. Just partially because some of my earliest memories of Nintendo sports games is World Class Track Meet and its use of the power
Absolutely.
pad, which we will talk about later. But the balance board brought that sort of idea into the Wii aesthetic is so successfully. Like I know the balance board is sort of a punchline now of like everyone has one, shoved under their couch somewhere. Because it's this weird, like kind of heavy, big piece of plastic that GameStop won't buy for 59 cents, but it is such like Wii Fit and Wii Fit Plus on the Wii U are both just such good like executions of a very simple premise of like how well do you balance and can you lean in this direction or that direction? How much control do you have over where you're standing right now? And I feel like it came like right in the same of like cresting the same wave of like people casually doing yoga at home or like going to yoga classes in like easy accessible ways. And when I say people, I mean like Americans. I'm saying like white ladies. And so like it felt very like of the moment, and just sort of had a good sense of how to measure something, something very still, very slow, and still like turning it into a game.
Yeah, like and the balance board, they were everywhere, like it really tapped into that like Wii zeitgeist where it's like, yeah, here is kind of like you have this Wii, you have Wii Sports. The next thing you're seeing on Good Morning America is this like Wii
Yes.
Fit. Yeah, that also it arrived at like the same time that Guitar Hero was really hit and Rock Band were really hitting big.
Yes.
And so it was just like in that wave of peripherals that if only Donkey Konga had come out like 5 years later, it could have been the trendsetter.
Donkey Konga missed the boat. I mean, it did set the trend. It's just no one realized it was the one setting.
That's
it.
right. That's right.
Everyone thought it was Guitar Hero.
It's like the handle on the GameCube that paved the way for the Switch.
100%.
My B is pretty general. It's baseball, baby. It is inescapable, beloved around the world, but I think especially in both Japan and the United States. Baseball is all over my list in some form or another.
That's so funny. I hadn't really considered like that how Japanese baseball is and how American it is, to the exclusion of most other places, right?
Right. Yeah. Like there are leagues in other countries, but it really is like a sport that is like the kind of like national sport of both Japan and the United States. Like NES baseball for the NES was designed by Shigeru Miyamoto and was like an early title on the Famicom in Japan, a launch title for the NES in America. Nintendo owned and is still a minority owner of like a baseball team. Like, yeah, just like there are baseball games on every single console ever. Baseball is just like, when you're talking Nintendo sports, like baseball is just inescapable.
Mark, do you think it's weird that we haven't seen a Mario baseball on the Switch yet?
I do kind of, especially because you have like the Joy-Con, which would
Swing it like a bat.
yeah, like
Swing it like a bat.
Yeah, like that was what was the one on the Wii, like Sluggers or like Super Sluggers or something like that? Mario Super Sluggers.
Like that,
That yeah, like that was the selling point of that. And then we didn't see anything in the Wii U era, I don't think. But it does seem like it's primed to make a resurgence. Although I guess the only Mario Sport title we've seen on Switch so far is Aces. We haven't seen golf. We haven't seen
soccer. We
Yeah.
haven't seen it seems like all of those. And again, we didn't want to tip our hand too much as to what might be coming down further in the list. But like, it's time, I guess, is what I'm leaning towards. We should see a baseball game sometime soon. Do you have a favorite Nintendo baseball game, or
I do have a favorite Nintendo baseball game. It is Ken Griffey Jr. presents Major League Baseball for the SNES.
Perfect.
That's the baseball game that I like. Like you, Patrick, I did not play a ton of sports games growing up. That was just like never a genre that I glommed onto. So there are like kind of like milepost sports games that I played a lot of, and one of them was for sure Ken Griffey Jr. presents Major League Baseball, published by Nintendo. I played a lot of that game.
I can picture the cover to that issue of Nintendo Power. Guess what? It's got Ken Griffey Jr. on it, swinging a baseball bat.
Next up is C, and speaking of world-class track meet from earlier, my C is Cheetah from world-class track meet.
Cheetah.
Cheetah like is the boss character, I guess, in the generously call it like career mode. I don't even really know. It was the only real mode. It was the only real like challenge in that game that I played. Could never really figure out. We had the power pad, which briefly, I think it won't spend too much time on it now, but the power pad was basically like a kind of like a Dance Dance Revolution mat that you would plug into your Nintendo Entertainment System, and it had two sides to it. One side had like a pattern that I never used ever, and then
it was like for step aerobics.
Yeah, and then side A was just 12 buttons, 6 in like a row. Wait, 12 buttons.
I think it's 16, right? Isn't it
16?
Four rows of 2 twice.
It could be. We'll have to look at a picture. That's why we're not talking about it today.
We're not talking about it now. Yes.
But anyways, you would like step on it, and you would step on a button on the left to represent the A button, and a button on the left represent the B button. But you could use it in games like World Class Track Meet too, and you were basically like running on it, and it would move your character on the screen in like this track meet. And if you jumped off both of them, it registered that as a jump, so you could do hurdles. Anyways, there was a like 100-meter dash and 100-meter hurdle, kind of like career mode, generously calling that. But basically, you would race a series of characters, and they were named after like how fast they were. It was turtle, bear, horse, rabbit, bobcat, and then cheetah. Cheetah at the end. And at the beginning, when he's warming up, he taunts you, "If you beat me, you're the best. I could never beat him. Cheetah was too fast for me."
Cheetah, I feel like, is the only one that presents any kind of challenge. Like, it is hilarious how slow Turtle moves. Like, everyone should be able to beat him. But yeah, Cheetah's very difficult, very fast. I always thought it was funny that Bear was one of them, whereas like I don't think about how fast a bear is. Like everything else, like, yeah, turtle, that's a slow. Rabbit, yeah, that's kind of fast. Horse, yeah, that's pretty fast. Bobcat, cheetah, yeah, those are fast animals. Bear? Any concept of how fast a bear is? I bet kind of fast. They're big, but I bet they're fast. They're muscular. That's great. Cheetah is a great pull. My C is for Charged, as in Mario Strikers Charged. This is a soccer game for the Nintendo Wii, featuring Mario characters, and the like big gimmick for each of the characters is that they have their own unique charge shots that they can store up, meter, and execute, and then make hard to block shots at the goals. Not a game that I played a bunch, and I had a little bit of a hard time coming up with the C, which is why I ended up like taking this back road to Mario Soccer. But it is a cool game with a neat sort of aggressive aesthetic, where like all the Mario characters look like they are ready to like start a soccer riot, and like there's something chaotic about it that I am into.
Yeah, sequel to the GameCube game, just Mario Strikers, and also developed by our newly acquired friends at Next Level Games.
That's right. Both of these games are developed by Next Level, so maybe we'll be seeing more of that in the future. Who knows?
But yeah, they definitely the character designs, and especially like their kits, like have a very much more like modern, I guess, like contemporary aesthetic.
Yeah. Well, and not just like a contemporary aesthetic, but they almost look like they're in like a sci-fi version of the real world. Like everything's a little bit more metallic and like angular than you would expect it to be. Even the ball looks more like something out of like a blitz ball more than a soccer ball. And yes, I've got Final Fantasy on the brain.
But I guess yeah, like I think that's totally right. And I feel like it's one of the rare instances of like Mario in the modern era where it doesn't stick very strictly to that like Mushroom Kingdom aesthetic like we definitely see in like Mario Tennis Aces. Like these are the Mario characters, but not really existing in that universe.
Yeah, which is kind of cool to see like a different side of them that's a little less plastic and like a little bit more, but I guess just a little less plastic. Okay, so for my D, I'm going with my man Drago, the dragon muscular antagonist from Ring Fit Adventure. This is the boss that awaits you at the end of every world of this game, which is seemingly interminable. I've like gone back hard into Ring Fit Adventure. I play it like 5 times a week now. And I don't know that there's an end to this game. I just keep going. And one of the things that I find like sort of reassuring as I play through it is that Drago is going to be waiting for me at the end of every level, or at the end of every world. And that those are sort of those are set piece battles that like I know I'm going to need to like be ready for, and with like power-ups, but also just like ready as a human to like work out for that much time, in a sustained fashion. It's cool that like he's got, and I know like the game story, whatever, it's mostly nonsense, and just like a flimsy excuse to make you do all these exercises, but I like that they build a relationship between the ring and Drago, that's like a thing that you are sort of always uncovering more information about. I don't know. He's fun. He's funny. He rocks that singlet. And I love that every time you encounter him, you're like distracting him from doing something he'd rather do.
Yeah, Drago is a great like entry in the Nintendo villain canon because he does have that like he's like his thing is that he's kind of like a pompous jerk, but he's like his characterization is still fun. Like like he fits in that like mold of like Bowser, where like I mean I guess he's a bad guy, but he's still like he's still a cool character.
Right. And also like it seems like we're both interested in the same thing. We both just want to like work out. Like I can relate.
So my D is doubles partners. Because thanks to Mario Tennis, the original Mario Tennis for the Nintendo 64, and that including doubles partners, we have that to thank for the advent of Waluigi, because somebody's got to be Wario's doubles partner. Plus, it was the first time that Daisy had been used since 1991.
Yeah. Pretty amazing that like the need to have a partner for a lot of those characters sort of like resurfaces a lot of. I would even put Birdo in this camp. That Birdo as Yoshi's double partner. We wouldn't have probably Birdo would have been left back in Super Mario Brothers too.
Yeah, I think I was actually looking it up. I think the last time the Birdo was used, like they make it like a brief appearance, like a cameo appearance in Super Mario RPG.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But
Yeah.
I mean,
Super
other
Mario
than that,
RPG is all deep cuts.
right? Exactly. And like Daisy had shown up in like one game as like a in 1991 as like a side character, like Wario's Woods or like something like that. Because yeah, before that it was Super Mario Brothers 2, or sorry, Super Mario Land on the Game Boy.
That's right.
So I think you're totally right. Like without without this need for the doubles partners, like who knows, maybe Daisy would be lost to time.
Yeah, Daisy and Birdo rescued by being doubles partners, and Waluigi invented whole cloth.
Yeah.
Can you imagine if they did something like that now, where it was just like, oh, we need a third Mario brother, and they just like invent one.
I can't wait. Oh, I'm hoping that's what the Illumination movie is about.
About a third Mario
Yeah,
brother
that we didn't know about all this time.
I mean that's not bad. I say you run with it.
So up next is E, and my E is Extreme Sports.
Yeah.
So the X Games kicked off in 1994, and over the next few years had like a profound effect on like 90s and sports culture in general. Everything just became like a little more extreme, as like silly as that sounds. So, and Nintendo like was not immune. Like Wave Race 64, you could is right on the cusp of that, was a Nintendo 64 launch title. But I think it's undeniable that games like 1080 Snowboarding in 1998 was like kind of was affected by this like extreme sports movement.
Yeah.
It was
riding that wave, as it were.
Yeah, it was a huge hit, and that like carried into the GameCube era with like Super Mario Strikers, like we were talking about in 2005, which is kind of like the end of that. But all that whole time was like this peak, like was the peak of extreme arcadey action game, like sports games in the video game industry in general. Like you had NBA Streets, you had NFL Blitz, like games that don't exist anymore because it's not the image that those leagues want to project. But at the time,
Sure.
like extreme sports was the like big thing in sports.
It's funny because I have quite a few picks that later in my list that refer to like skateboarding and surfing, which like kind of are sort of like the harbingers of the X Games and extreme sports, right? Like they sort of like came before and like were cool before that. And so it's kind of interesting to track that as like surf and skate culture like starts here, and then extreme sports kind of like shifts it just to the side a little bit, and becomes something like so much bigger and encompasses so many other sports.
Yeah, totally.
My E is Excite Bike, because motorcycle racing is a sport. I said it. Excite Bike is a game that I know on the original NES is available on all of your NES things, the NES, Switch Online, etc. And it's a game that, as a kid, I'd never really wrapped my head around what it wants you to do, like controlling the angle as you are flying through the air, going over jumps or whatever. Like that's the only way to really get good at it, or like shave seconds off your time. What I thought was the coolest thing in the world was the track editor. Is the very first time I experienced a video game that lets you edit levels, especially the very first console game that did that. And that the high of making a track in Excite Bike is something that I chase to this day, and I've experienced it in only a handful of games. Sometimes Mario Maker, Mod Nation Racers, something similar there. But it was just so easy and so fun to like make up a course, try it out, crash a bunch, and then make a new course again. And the music in Excite Bike is also incredible.
Yeah, the music is really good. Like Excite Bike is one of those like classic Nintendo things that I don't really have any experience with. The most experience I have with anything Excite Bike is the track in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. And
Yeah.
and I love the music in that track. When that track comes up, and I'm when like playing with a group of people in local
Yeah.
co-op, like it's totally one of those. I totally become one of those people at a party who's like, "Shut up! We have to listen to this song." Like
We just had to listen to that opening riff, that do-do-da-da-do-da-da.
I really wish that Mario Kart 8 Deluxe had the ability to like control the sound levels, and so be like,
Absolutely.
oh, I want to like bring the sound effects way down and bring the music way up, and I basically just want to hear the music.
I mean, first of all, it should have a music player in it, and then you should be able to stream that directly to your phone, because this is my constant ask of Nintendo, and I'll never get it. But yeah, 100%. I don't know why there's not an option to turn down these sound effects and character voices and turn the music up, because I would do it in a heartbeat. There's so much good music in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe.
Yeah, totally.
It's unreal. Okay, so that was my E. Moving on to F. My F is freestyle. This is my first skateboard reference here. In the game Skate or Die on the original NES, this is not a Nintendo published game, but it appears on the NES, so I'm counting it. Freestyle is the mode where you are skating in a half pipe, and you can just do tricks, and it just racks up a score, and there's nothing that makes you stop playing, other than you turning, like pushing start and exiting the mode. Skate or Die had a lot of like different mini games in it, maybe like 5 or 6. That like there's one that's like a downhill race. There's a couple other modes, but like by far and away the best is this freestyle mode where you just keep going back and forth on this half pipe for as long as you want, as long as you can do tricks.
Well, speaking of extreme sports and skateboarding, my F is Funky Kong.
Oh my gosh.
Now, that he is a surfer and a plane barrel pilot is indisputable.
Mm-hmm.
In
Right.
Donkey Kong Country
Cannot be disputed.
Cannot be disputed. In Donkey Kong Country 3, he is also the purveyor / inventor of jet skis, a hovercraft, a motorboat, and a gyrocopter. And yes, in Nintendo 64, he is an arms dealer. Or sorry, Donkey Kong 64, he's an arms dealer. We are skipping over that because
That's a
more
problem.
importantly,
That's right.
he plays baseball in Super Mario Sluggers for Wii, and he does it using his surfboard.
No, he does not.
Yes.
You liar. There's no way that's true. Is that true?
That is true. And so thus I rest my case for Funky Kong as the most likely Nintendo character to participate in the X Games.
Interesting. And he's an arms dealer? I'm counting it now.
Up next is G. And for G, I'm going with golf, specifically the classic NES game. And even more specifically, the fact that the NES game was hidden as an Easter egg and tribute to Satoru Iwata in the firmware of Nintendo Switch, if in system version 4.0 and lower. So I guess really like anything below 4.0. And then was taken out, was put in like the whole thing is really weird. Like it was put in seemingly as a tribute to Satoru Iwata. Iwata was the sole programmer of the NES game Golf, and it was one of his first projects that he worked on for Nintendo. Iwata, of course, went on to become Nintendo's CEO. Golf could only be accessed when the system clock was set to July 11th, which was the anniversary of Iwata's death, and it couldn't be like manually set to July 11th. If you ever connected your system to the internet, it like stored that first time in its internal clock.
It knew. Yeah.
And so it knew if you were being truthful or not. And then seemingly the user had to use the Joy-Cons to perform like the direct action that Iwata used to do in his Nintendo Direct appearances, where he would kind of like bring both hands forward. And then that would launch a version of NES Golf that apparently had been updated to use motion controls in the Joy-Con. it was such a specific set of steps that you had to go through that like it was like randomly found, but then nobody really knew if it was true. And like I don't know if people actually like triggered it for real or if it was only ever done by like modders or people who were like messing around with the firmware for the Switch. But it's just one of those like I had forgotten about it until I was looking up stuff for this episode, and just one of those like interesting Nintendo tidbits that existed for a short amount of time, and then now we will never be able to experience ever again.
I can't believe that this version of the game incorporates motion controls. That's wild.
Yeah, yeah.
It's crazy that that's not accessible now, especially when golf is accessible on the NES Switch Online.
Yeah, it was. I mean, very clearly a labor of love for at least one person who was working on the Switch firmware.
My G, I went for Grand Prix, which is the basic structure for every Mario Kart game you've ever played. Where it's the structure by which you take on a whole circuit of or a whole cup of individual tracks, and get get first place as many times as you can, and get points that add up to whatever your final score is. There would be no Mario Kart without Grand Prix, so that's I guess I don't have a lot to say about it, but that's my G. My H, Mark. We kind of teased this the other week. Maybe we did. Maybe we just talked about it off mic. My H is Hoops for Mario 3-on-3 Hoops, or 3-on-3 Hoops Super Mario Hoops 3-on-3. I'm not sure what the name of this game actually is. It is a DS game developed by Square Enix, that they were like working on, and they were like, this would be better if it were a basketball game with Mario characters in it. Approached Nintendo, and Nintendo was like, okay, sure. So it has Mario in it, but it also has some like random Final Fantasy characters in it, including a black mage, a white mage, a ninja, the Cactor enemy, which is like a little cactus with like arms and like is weird, and a Moogle. So all of these characters are sort of like mixed together in a 3-on-3 almost NBA Jam like Mario basketball game.
I remember I never played it, but I remember reading like previews of that game, like little blurbs in Nintendo Power.
Yeah, I'm in actually the exact same boat. This is not a game that I've ever played, but it is so fascinating to me, because like every part of it, I'm like, wait, what? Like, why was Square Enix working on like the premise, the starting point is absurd. Square Enix is working on a basketball game. Why? and then they're like, you know what? This needs Mario characters. And like, what? And then Nintendo's like, okay, sure. Which is like the third what? And we're not even to the part where a black mage and a white mage are playable characters in a Mario basketball game. It's so weird.
Yeah, totally. That, and it sticks out to me for that same exact reason. Like a game I never played, and yet I can't stop thinking about it because it is like I think when it was released, like it got okay reviews. Like it's not like it has stood the test of time, but it's just such a weird concept and mashup that has like a permanent place in my brain.
Yeah, it lives rent free for sure. If anyone has played this game, I would love to get some like actual impressions of what it was like to play it. So email us, Nintendo Cartridge Society at
gmail.com. My H is Hiya, which, yes, is a like horrible Anglicization of a Japanese word that actually begins with the letter K, but I am going with it for H, especially because if you were not around in the 80s or early 90s, you may not be aware that America had a brief love affair during that time with like martial arts, including the Karate Kid franchise, the canonization of Jean-Claude Van Damme, and for the purposes of this show, Nintendo games like Kung Fu, which was an NES launch title.
Yeah, Kung Fu very well. I just first to speak to the like karate craze of like the 80s and 90s. Like, definitely Three Ninjas falls into that. Surf Ninjas falls into that. Also a surf thing, so it's like a double whammy. Um, but like, I would think people now would be aware of it simply by virtue of the popularity of Cobra Kai, which is referring
Totally.
back to,
Yeah.
of course, the Karate Kid movies. But yeah, Kung Fu is sort of notorious for being a side scroller that made you travel from right to left.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And it's uh like not particularly good or particularly memorable. It is
Right.
based on a arcade game that was not published by Nintendo. I think it was like Imrim or something like that that developed it, and then there was a port of it to the NES that Nintendo ended up publishing and was a NES launch title. But like the actual mechanics and all of that, like not particularly memorable, but
Yeah.
definitely one of those NES like launch titles that was perfectly timed for what like America wanted at the time.
Yeah.
Up next is Internet. I for Internet. Internet as in esports. Walk with me here, people.
I'm doing it. Hey, look, this is great. This is an avenue of sport that we have not yet covered here. Esports are sports. Mark, this is genius. Tell me a little bit more about esports and Nintendo.
Well, it's interesting because I feel like Nintendo has their own championship series that they host
Yes.
for Super Smash Brothers. They've been doing that for a while, even before Ultimate came out. For Splatoon and now Splatoon 2. And then there's the Pokemon like Championship League. And so it's interesting, they have like these championships these tournaments that they run and that they are the owners of. And the people who like populate these championships for the most part also exist in the fan community and in these fan leagues. But Nintendo has like a really, I would say, fraught relationship with the fan leagues
Totally.
where they don't really like acknowledge they exist except to shut them down for the most part. Like when
Right.
the fan leagues like most recently wanted to use a modded version of Super Smash Brothers Melee, which was for the Nintendo GameCube, but it had been modded to be able to play online, and that like stepped over a line for Nintendo, and so they shut it down. I mean, they may have other reasons for doing it. Last year was not a good year for the. I think it was last year for like the Smash Brothers communities reckoning with like abuse that was seemingly rampant in the
Yeah, rampant in the fighting game community, but even more specifically in the Smash Brothers community. So I mean, that is a sort of like Iron Fist Nintendo thing that I'm sympathetic to. That if there are going to be communities around their games, and some of those communities end up being like predatory and taking advantage of people who especially children, then like, yeah, I think Nintendo should be shutting those down, but I think they should probably just be working more with those communities to do the types of things that they want to do, especially when Mark, how much do you know about the net code that is used for fighting games online? Like, I'm sorry, I'm posing this as a question that sounds really like crappy and
well,
condescending.
I
How much do you even know?
I think I mean really only what we've discussed previously on this show, which is
Yeah.
like how the net code kind of like guesses what the next
Yes.
input is going to be, so that way it reduces lag, and then
This is called, yeah, it's called rollback netcode, where it sets both players back like 3 or 4 frames, and the sort of like where it meets in the middle, the game guesses your previous input based on your next input based on your previous input if it doesn't have that input from you when it's like calculating the next game state. So if you were walking forward, it's going to assume that you're still walking forward. And as far as like frames go, that's correct 99% of the time, right? If you were pushing a button in the previous frame, you're likely still pushing it in this new frame. And so it just means that both players are on a 3 frame delay, 3 or 4 frame delay, depending on how much the rollback is, and that there is never any stutter. It appears to be a very like silky smooth experience, and the only time that it doesn't really work like that is when someone does something unexpectedly. But even then, it's not as though it like happens and causes like a backup in the sort of like inputs and display. So the long and the short of it is this Melee mod was using the sort of rollback netcode, which is not something that the new Smash Brothers uses. A lot of Japanese fighting game developers do not use rollback netcode, which is partly why the American and European fighting games have so much better netcode. Even indie games using GGPO, which is short for Good Game Peace Out, which is sort of a proprietary rollback platform that leads to this really easy and useful online. Same thing that Killer Instinct uses and like Mortal Kombat 11. It's just weird that things like the Smash Ultimate and Street Fighter 5 don't use technology like that.
Wow, that's really interesting.
I watched a couple YouTube videos. Now I think I know everything. Mark, my eye is for ice hockey on the NES. This is one of my favorite early NES sports games. You pick between like 6 or 7 different countries that you want your team to represent, and then it feels like it's a totally unlicensed. You're not playing as any. You're playing as countries and not as professional hockey teams. You get to decide the size of your players. There's a skinny guy, a medium-sized guy, and a fat guy. And the fat guy has an amazing design. It looks like his nose is really wide, but maybe it's just like the strap on his helmet. It's amazing. The fat guys are kind of slow, but they will check the little guys. The fighting mechanic is really funny. That like you can just sort of skate up to someone and like start pushing. It's either A or B. To just start hitting them with your hockey stick. They can start hitting you back, and eventually like it's a bench clearer, and like everyone just like skates out into the ice and starts beating each other up. It's amazing. I love that game.
I think I played a little bit of it when it became available on like the NES Switch Online.
Yeah. Likely when it became available, I was very excited about it and said something about it on the show. It's very good. I like it a lot. It's very charming and fast. And is probably the I say probably, but definitely the first hockey game I ever played. So my J, I know we sort of skated up to this before, is jet skis. Specifically those as they appear in Wave Race 64. I know there have been Wave Race games since Wave Race 64, and Wave Race 64 itself is a sequel to a Game Boy game called Wave Race. But Wave Race 64 is to me the like platonic ideal of Wave Race because it reduces like the video game to the relationship between the craft and the water. The water level changes in all of these tracks, and the physics of it feel very like real. You have to understand and like intuit the buoyancy of your vehicle and the speed at which you're hitting waves. It just feels very like intimate and dynamic.
I also think that jet skis were having a moment in a way that like they exist in the culture now, and like jet skis continue to exist, but I feel like for whatever reason in the same time that like Wave Race 64 was hitting, like there were jet ski arcade games and that sort of thing. Like it was just like a nice cultural moment for jet skis.
Is there okay? So I get I had in my mind a jet ski sequence from a James Bond movie, and I couldn't place which one it is. Maybe I'm even making it up. Maybe it's not real.
I'm not sure. It seems like it'd have to be a Pierce Brosnan one.
It does feel like that. There's who is this? The Spy Who Loved Me. Okay, so that's a Roger Moore. I mean, the Pierce Brosnan, he's definitely riding around like rocket boats.
That seems right. And there's definitely surfing, I think, in Die Another Day.
Yes, yeah, well, for sure. Oh, Die Another Day. It's so bonkers. I love it.
My J is Jones, talking about Mike Jones, the star of the Star Tropics series. He's just your average everyday.
I'm proud of you.
Yeah.
I'm proud of you.
Hey, somebody's got to tick that Star Tropics box every episode.
Yeah.
Mike Jones is just your average everyday kid from Seattle, Washington, who happens to be a left-handed ace pitcher and just really loves baseball.
That's right. And he's so good at being a pitcher that he is also an adept user of a yo-yo as a weapon. Right, like that's sort of like the fiction they lead you down of
Yeah,
like, yeah,
absolutely.
that's why he can use it.
Yeah, his throw is just too powerful that anything in his hand becomes a weapon.
That's a good one. Jones is a good one.
Next
I
up,
want him back. I want to see him in something else. I don't care what it is.
does
Smash would be great.
I was gonna say, does Smash Ultimate have like a tribute of any kind to Star Tropics? Is there a like Zoda a trophy or anything?
I don't know. I'm gonna go looking for it now.
Yeah, I think it may be a missing series. But hey, there's still what, 3 or 4 more characters for
3 left,
Fighter
yeah.
Pack 2, so maybe Mike Jones can still make it. K, moving on to K, it's Kirby's Feats of Strength. I know that previously I said that Funky Kong would be the Nintendo character show up at the X Games, but I think an argument could be made for Kirby. Most Kirby games include sub games of some kind outside of their main campaigns, and Kirby, a lot of them are like sports based. You have Star Slam Heroes from Star Allies. It's like a home run derby, but with meteors instead of baseballs. There's a
It's really funny. Have you played that mode?
yeah.
Yeah, to just because you knock these comets out and they like fly through the solar system and like out into deep space. It's really neat.
There's like a rail grinding challenge from Nightmare in Dreamland where basically like Kirby is using like a superstar as a skateboard, and there's one also where like they're racing on waves using like the superstar as a surfboard.
Like a surfboard.
And that one
yeah.
kind of has like an excite bike like mechanic where you have to like time your button inputs on the crest, the wave crest,
Yeah.
in order to like get ahead. There's hurdle races in Kirby Tilt and Tumble. So Kirby is like an all-around athletic guy, possibly the most powerful character in Nintendo's universe. And so of course he's going to be good at sports as well.
Hilariously, my K is also Kirby related, but is not something that you mentioned here. I am referring, of course, to Kirby's Dream Course, where Kirby is reduced to the role of golf ball. This is a game for the Super NES. It is available on the SNES Switch Online and on the SNES Classic Edition. It is a really cool kind of mashup of like miniature golf and like sort of Marble Madness, where like you are aiming Kirby like which way he's going. You never like see a club hit him. He just sort of like launches forward. And it's really neat. The game is fun, and all the courses are like really interesting and challenging. Again, having it on the SNES Classic Edition turns the game into a playable game instead of like something that is frustrating that you'll turn off right away, where you can take a swing and be like, oh, I can see I was obviously way too hard on that, and then like actually gauge. There's no like preview of how far you're going to hit Kirby.
Mm-hmm.
And the like putting portion of the game, like when you were trying to actually get it into the hole at the very end of the course, because you had to knock over like a couple of the like bad guy heads before you can go into the hole. But the hole is so sensitive that you can overshoot it so easily. You've got to get Kirby to stop right on the dot. But it's a super fun game, and one that I didn't appreciate, I don't think, when it was originally on the Super NES.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever played it before, but I guess, like if Kirby is so powerful that he can be and do anything, that occasionally you end up like debasing yourself and you're just a golf ball.
You just got to be the ball. Also, Mark, I noticed that as you were listing the various sports that Kirby played, you didn't mention any of the lumberjack sports that he would be good at.
Oh my
there
gosh.
are also parts in Kirby Star Allies where there are a mini game where you're like chopping down a tree.
Yeah. Oh, Kirby would be incredible at like one of those Highland games, or like a barn raising, or when like in Seven Brides for Seven Brothers when they get on top of like the well. Like the log in the middle of a well that you like have rope on, and they're like rolling it up, and
yes, of course,
they're balancing on it. Like Kirby would be great at that.
Oh man, I want to see Kirby doing only the weirdest sports. That's all I want from Kirby. My L, I I picked this L even knowing that like this has got to be Mark's L too, but maybe it won't be. Little Mac is my L, the hero of the Punch Out franchise, the player character. Little Mac, look, he had to take over and be the standard bearer for Punch Out after Nintendo ended their relationship with Mike Tyson, and they did so rightly because not a good human. An impressive guy who obviously his name sold a lot of games. But Little Mac is an impressive character who got sort of the short shaft, was weirdly changed and whitewashed in the Super NES game, where he's like some weird little blonde dude, and you're like, that's not Little Mac, that's someone else.
Yeah, in like they called him Little Mac at least in like the American release, but it is definitely not Little Mac.
Yeah, there's no way that this is Little Mac. And so it's great that by the time, well, which came out first? Or I guess he when did Little Mac first appear in Smash Brothers? In
Oh,
4?
yeah, for the yes, the Wii U / 3DS one.
Okay. Okay, so the Wii version of Punch Out was first, which or before Smash. So like that sort of like solidified this design of Little Mac, which is, and like the art style too, which I feel like carries over into um into Smash Brothers. And he's an icon now. Like he's the perfect underdog who doesn't feel like an underdog. Like he's little, but he is fearsome. He's got those great trunks. He's got that awesome orange or pink hoodie. He's great. Little Mac is wonderful.
Yeah, Little Mac is also my L. The only thing I'll add
knew
is the only thing I'll add is that he's hot.
Yeah. Little Mac is super hot.
Moving on to M, our final letter for this episode. We will continue next week, finishing out the alphabet. My M is Madden 97 for the Super Nintendo.
Oh.
So just like with Ken Griffey Jr. presents Major League Baseball, this was a sports game that I mean, this is for sure the version of Madden that I put the most time into, and it's one of those games where
On
like
the Super Nintendo 97?
yeah, here's yes, and that's a great reaction because unbeknownst to me,
Thank you.
unbeknownst to me, and it wasn't until like doing research for this episode and like looking it up that I realized, oh yeah, there was a version of Madden 97 for the PlayStation, for the Dreamcast, maybe not for the Dreamcast, for the PlayStation, for like the Genesis, and the Super Nintendo one is the one that is very poorly regarded. And it was just an interesting moment of reflection where you're like, huh, like as a kid, I loved this game. Like I put so much time into it and like really had a blast. And if somebody was like, what version of Madden do you love? It is clearly Madden 97 for me. And it is very poorly regarded. Generally, people do not like this game.
I mean that that makes sense to me, but I also love that, like the sort of myopia of like, this is the version that I played. I don't know. I liked it.
Yeah, you have what you have.
Have you kept up with or like gone back to any Madden games since 97?
No, I've not really like
In the last 23 years?
yeah, I haven't really played a lot of it. There's something about like sports simulation games that are very difficult to like hold my attention. And really the last football game that I put a ton of time into was NFL Blitz for the PlayStation 3, where they would like where injuries were kind of the point. Like the more
Yeah.
gruesome the injury, like they would do like a close up x-ray version so you could see like the bones snapping, and it's like, geez, I wonder why the NFL didn't want that to be like the like headlining franchise. But no, it's been and at this point that was like 15 years ago itself. So no, it's been a long time since I've like really played a football video game.
I know what you mean about being turned off by simulation games. At the beginning of the pandemic, I bought a copy of MLB The Show 2020 for Sarah and I to try to play together. And because she likes baseball, was upset, understood why baseball wasn't happening. Then baseball happened, and so we were like, we'll get into this. We'll give it a try. And like they give you a lot of opportunities to like sort of customize what way you want to control stuff. But everything is based on like the actual stats and abilities of the real players in the real world, which it quickly becomes overwhelming if you don't eat, breathe, and sleep baseball.
If you don't eat, pray, love baseball, then
you got to eat, pray, love it.
No, for me, it's the same thing as like racing games where Gran Turismo and Forza. It's like I don't have that appreciation of cars where like the minutia is really interesting to me. And so the same thing for like these like simulation sports games where like like that aspect of it doesn't grab me.
My M and our final entry for this episode is, of course, Mega Man Soccer. This is another Super Nintendo game, and a game that doesn't really make sense to me. Mega Man never again grafted onto a sports franchise. What is this game?
I didn't even know this existed or exists. I guess it still exists.
It still does exist. It has never been ported to another platform, including any of the Mega Man collections. So it is a relic. It is stuck on the Super NES. I should try to get a cartridge of this because I think I would have fun revisiting it. It takes place after the events of Mega Man 4 and includes all of the Mega Man characters up to that point. So the robot bosses from those first 4 games. Mega Man, Proto Man, Roll, Rush, Dr. Wily, Dr. Light, and in reading up Dr. Cossack, the villain sort of from Mega Man 4, there's a point in that game where you realize he's sort of being blackmailed to being the bad guy. Anyway, no spoilers for Mega Man 4, I guess, although I just did spoil it. One of the things that I learned about this game while reading up on it for this episode is the following paragraph that I'm reading from the story section of the Mega Man Wiki's article on Mega Man Soccer. Mega Man Soccer doesn't have an ending, and the player returns to the title screen after completing the game. But the game does contain an unused ending song, or ending and credits sequence. The only way to access that ending is through a cheat. So the game is obviously broken. There's no real story other than like people are playing soccer and the robot masters appear and Mega Man is like, I better get in there and play soccer too. And then you do it.
Oh, I mean, that's kind of all of the story you need in Mega Man Soccer.
Totally. But a weird little note that there is no no ending to the game. It just ends. All right. That's the first half of our ABCs. Let's close this out. Okay, that's going to do it for this episode of Nintendo Cartridge Society. We will be back with N through Z next week. But in the meantime, please rate, review, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts if you like the episode. You should share it on Facebook or Twitter, wherever you share sports stuff, because this is a sports podcast now. We're doing it. I've now claimed that this podcast is 2 different things in this episode. A Mario Tennis podcast and a sports podcast.
I guess people will just have to continue listening to see which one wins out. It's like Alien versus Predator.
No matter who wins, we lose. You can follow us on Twitter. I'm at Patrick_Ellers. Mark is at MKE Mitchell. And the show is at Nin Cart Society. We also have a Facebook page, which is just Nintendo Cartridge Society. Olivia Duncan made our logo. Our theme music is provided by 8-Bit Betty. You can get more of his music by going to 8bitbetty.com or by listening right now. For my co-host, Mark Mitchell, this is Patrick Eller saying, yeah, Funky Kong plays baseball with a surfboard. Thank you for listening.
Have you ever encountered an unexplained hairy bipedal hominid in the woods?
Have you received telepathic messages from an unidentified aerial phenomenon?
If so, then you need to listen to Bigfoot Collectors Club. I'm Michael McMillan.
And I'm Bryce Johnson.
And together with super producer
Riley Bray,
we make up the Bigfoot Collectors Club.
That's right. Every week we talk to actors, comedians, writers, and paranormal experts about their personal paranormal histories and share stories of high strangeness.
Like the time when we talked to Craig Ferguson about the Loch Ness Monster and when a sea witch told him he had raven magic.
Or the time I asked Pitch Perfect's Anna Camp her opinion on cattle mutilations. Past guests have included Rachel Bloom, Jen Kirkman, Paul F. Tompkins, Bobcat Goldthwait, and more.
So if you've ever been abducted alongside 5 reindeer by an alien with drills for hands or witnessed Bigfoot crawl out of an interdimensional portal,
Don't laugh, happens all the time.
then check out Bigfoot Collectors Club on Campfire Media or wherever you get your podcasts.
Bigfoot Collectors Club. You're here to believe us.
Wait, is that how it goes?
Campfire.